Let's talk about Top Gear.
That's not gone well! Oh my God.
Great success!
2022, and more specifically this month, marks 20 years that Top Gear has been on our screens. Except that's not quite accurate. Top Gear actually began in 1977 as a little regional motoring show. It was not Top Gear in the sense of what we've become used to. It was a steady half-hour slot where they would talk about interesting things like consumer advice.
I'm a great believer in driving on mirrors.
Sure enough, it got cancelled, but not before they'd made 45 series and 524 episodes.
Wow.
If you ever get the pub quiz question of who created Top Gear, don't be tempted to put Jeremy Clarkson or Andy Wilman. The creator was actually a BBC executive by the name of Derek Smith. He proposed the concept for Top Gear to the BBC, with the first series being shown in 1977. It was being based out of Birmingham and being shown to an audience not that big, really. The BBC took notice of Top Gear and decided to pump them up to national coverage on BBC Two. It would stay there until the show's cancellation in 2001. The next foundation came in the decade of the hairdo, the 1980s. Everything and everyone was loud, bombastic, and just a little bit wild. Everything except for one Jeremy Clarkson.
What's called a two-door coupe, i.e. it has one long door on either side.
Now I know that is clearly not Jeremy Clarkson. That has to be a well-mannered, well-dressed, posh relative of his. Fortunately, they swapped out the Clarkson lookalike for this lard of hair.
Somebody turned it into a banana-shaped Bentley.
And alas, another foundation was laid. I think we can all agree that the 1980s were a little bit crazy. But for Top Gear, the 90s were even more far-fetched. That 6-foot, pube-head loudmouth became more prominent on the show and pushed Top Gear to a more brash and ultimately funnier version of what had gone before.
Bungee jumping in your coffee break, or how about a bit of fly fishing over lunch?
Jeremy often jokes that cars as a thing are boring.
Well, I'd rather listen to Joan than drone on about cars, frankly. She's much more interesting.
We need to sell it a bit.
Well, we have done now.
Okay.
There, buy that. Now, Joan, tell me more.
But one of the many talents he has, and something that's really helped his career, is to make them funny, interesting, and something that kind of anyone can understand.
And then there's the underneath. Now, the rear end is suspended not on coil springs, as you might imagine, but on sort of rickshaw technology that looks like it's come off a piece of farm machinery.
Next comes by the name of Andy Wilman. He used to be a presenter in the 90s, and he would often do the weirder pieces on Top Gear.
And I was naked in the back of the jacuzzi.
Now, the more casual viewers among you may have heard the name Wilman occasionally.
Have you noticed this is his keyboard, Mr. Wilman's?
It's cropped up every now and again. That's because Wilman is the mastermind of the show, but we'll get to that a bit later. The next foundation is James May, but it's a bit of a complicated one. So Jeremy began to have ambitions that outweighed how far Top Gear could take him. He was doing his DVD.
Oh, for God's sake. My video's in the discount bin.
He was doing all sorts of other TV shows.
So, you will remember that.
And he was writing about 1,000 books a minute.
I've done and book.
In 1999, he announced his departure from Top Gear, causing all the producers to kind of go,
That's not gone well.
they needed someone who could also be funny about cars, and that led them to James May.
Well, then you don't get...
Hello.
He got the job, and as Clarkson never fails to tell him, it was the beginning of the end for Top Gear.
You have to start with hello.
The final foundation, and an excruciatingly important piece of the Top Gear puzzle, is a man by the name of Richard Porter. When the chance for anyone in the country to send ideas in for Top Gear, he responded. He was then interviewed and hired as a researcher for Top Gear. When the Top Gear ship sank, he anonymously started a website called Sniff Petrol, in which he would incorrectly report on manufacturers and just joke about the motoring industry in general. So, we have Jeremy Clarkson, James May, Andy Wilman, Richard Porter, and the 90s as the foundations of the reason why you're all here.
This is it.
Almost immediately following the final series of Top Gear in December of 2001, Jeremy Clarkson and Andy Willman pitched their idea for what Top Gear should be to the BBC. The BBC were keen to have a motoring show back on their roster. They liked the pitch, they knew Jeremy's mere presence would just bring in viewers, so they commissioned the show to start in 2002. In the months that had passed since old Top Gear's departure from the small screen, a little website called Sniff Petrol had become quite popular among motoring fans. One motoring fan in particular was very impressed by what he saw, and that was Clarkson. He reached out to Richard Porter, at the time not even knowing who it was behind the site, and kind of said,
That was brilliant!
maybe there's something I'd like to talk to you about. A few meetings pass and Richard Porter lands the role of what would become script editor. They had the staff, they'd heard someone had sourced an aircraft hangar for the studio, and the runway tarmac at the time was being scouted by Lotus for the test track. Things were coming together. Except for presenters. There was an idea to do an open audition for presenters. Anyone could send their tapes in. Jeremy would obviously be the lead presenter, but who would be next to him? This guy?
Hello and welcome to Gaz on Motors. Today we're going to be looking at instrumentation. You can tell this isn't
it's still going on.
because apart from this one only has the odd meter, whereas the Mini Cooper had both odd meter and trip.
Yes, that was a real submission.
Gaz was heroically dull.
Yeah. So, after numerous screen tests, the production team decided on Richard Hammond and Jason Dorr. Now, even though this was the reboot, Series 1 is still vastly different to what we had now identify as Top Gear.
Button and...
Hi, Jeremy.
It detects me and goes back up again.
Jason Dorr would provide car buying advice, Jeremy would interview guests and generally take the role of lead presenter, and Richard would do consumer advice, filler segments, and would often be the one having kind of back and forth banter with Clarkson.
Ooh, wait a minute, 4,
Stretching
7...
this, isn't it?
Back in Series 1, their budget was considerably smaller than what they have now, obviously. So, to fill gaps in the show, they had to get, creative. Like, can a granny do donuts? And what's the fastest religion?
A bishop. I mean, we had to say yes.
But it was this silliness that kind of captured the audience's attention. Unsurprisingly, Series 1 was a big success, reaching an average of 3.3 million UK viewers per episode.
She just liked it.
But even surpassing the BBC's original request of 3 million UK viewers wasn't good enough. They wanted more. BBC management were pushing for a presenter change. Initially, Richard was under the limelight to be removed, but in the end it was Jason that got the boot, and replaced by some bloke named James.
Hi.
He was part of the presenting team when it was kind of going a bit that way. But after seeing this new format, he was like,
Can I just make it absolutely clear now that I'm only here because the producer said I had to be?
So Series 2 comes, so there's a new presenter, and it was clear from the get-go that James had more chemistry with Hammond and Clarkson than Jason did.
He's called James May, and on the evidence of what we're about to see, he is a blithering idiot.
Sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. I hate to interrupt, but this is quite honestly the biggest load of limp-wristed twaddle I've ever heard in all my 5 weeks in television.
You can actually see their chemistry growing throughout these new segments, and that would later lead to films presented by a combination of presenters rather than just individually, and only coming together in the studio.
This one, Richard Hammond, every morning sticks his head in a bucket of hair product. Right? He's got a dog, but it's a poodle. And I don't know what you're laughing about, Clarkson, because you won't drink brown beer. And this is the man that says flatulence, oh, it's not funny, when clearly it is, isn't it?
Now, I could honestly talk all day about the Top Gear timeline, but for the sake of this video and not wasting your entire day, what I'm going to do is talk about the key points of Top Gear, including crashes, controversies, a lack of stake, and honestly, why I think you should still be watching Top Gear, even though Jeremy, Richard and James aren't there anymore.
Car.
Let the people speak.
The people are speaking.
Top Gear has become synonymous with hosting challenges, races and other segments with no value other than pure entertainment. During Series 1 alone, you had Which is the Fastest Religion, Can a Granny Do Donuts, How to Create a Budget Bond Car, and How to Beat a Speed Camera. Series 2, however, became much more serious, like how long does it take a jet-powered dragster to incinerate a Nissan Sunny? Which is faster? A rally pit crew basically fitting a new car to their wheels, or a group of women getting ready for a night out?
So this is properly scientific. On you go then. Go. Commence.
Guess who won?
27 minutes in and the rally team has finished. And as for the girls...
What? That goes round. That goes round. Right.
Going into Series 3, the Stig attempted to reach 100 miles an hour on an aircraft carrier. Yeah, he died. As it turns out, Perry McCarthy, who was the Black Stig, published a book revealing his identity, thus breaking his non-disclosure agreement.
But there's plenty more where he came from. A very big hand, please, for Top Gear's new Stig!
And there you have it. It took until Series 3 to get the classic Top Gear lineup that we all know and love. But that wasn't it for foundation laying in that series. In only the second episode, we had our very first segment in which each of the presenters would pick their favourite of a particular type of car and then argue their case against the other two. In this instance, it was which is the best two-seater roadster, the BMW Z4, the Porsche Boxster, or the Honda S2000.
How many gears did your car have?
That'll be
Richard?
6, Jeremy.
How many did my car have? Do you remember?
I'm thinking it was probably 6 again. It was 6.
5 because it has
5. Cheers. Welcome. 6 gear, man.
That is Top Gear. The races were a huge part of Top Gear's early years' identity. Some of the films I've mentioned previously have just been for pure entertainment, but the race was something different. The first race was Jeremy in an Aston Martin DB9 while James and Richard were on public transport.
£5.60.
Back in the early 2000s, questions were being raised as to whether these new ultra-fast French trains were actually quicker to get to the south of France than a plane, let alone a car.
Swaddle. Rubbish. No train can be faster than cars. Not possible.
This for me is one of the best examples of what made Top Gear. They could tackle these real-world questions in the most entertaining way possible. In the end, it was Jeremy that won that particular race.
You two look very stressed and tired. I'm very relaxed.
There is a degree of perspiration going on.
But the production team quickly realised how successful this was and continued the races for a couple more series before running out of sensible opponents for the cars. It got to a point where we had a Bugatti Veyron racing James May in a flying washing machine, transporting truffles from Italy to London.
65 quid that cost. Something that looks like a mummified testicle.
The concept was a little far-fetched, but the race was so good that it didn't really matter. Now, one criticism Top Gear has always received is that the races were always staged. And one of the critics' main sticking points with this and main evidence is how do you get those nice cinematic shots if you're truly racing across a continent? The pickup shots, that's the nice scenery shots, were actually done the following day when another production unit and a professional driver would rerun the race route. In the instance with the Bugatti Veyron versus the plane, it was actually Ben Collins, who's not the Stig, who was driving the Veyron. So now you know the races were run for real. A hugely popular item on the show was the cheap car challenges. You know the thing, the 3 guys were given £1,000 and were told to go and buy a specific type of car for a series of challenges, but it didn't start that way.
So we were told to go off and buy a car. That's a road legal car for less than 100 quid.
I was ready to go, oh no, James has bought a hen house. Where is the hamster?
It's a Rover!
GTI.
Yes, I know, but...
Yeah, granted, it does go down.
Over.
So Manchester and back.
Easy.
Easy.
Okay.
Because what it says is, each of you must drive your car into a wall at 30 miles an hour.
Hey?
That was probably the most unpleasant thing I've ever done.
Not exactly what we've become used to, but back then it was new, it was fresh, and it was really entertaining. So they did more. We had £1,500 Porsches that broke down. We had £1,500 non-Porsches that also broke down.
It just ruins your whole day, that sort of thing.
All right. Curly Whirly?
I have a Snickers, actually, mate.
Can I, mate?
Want to get James something?
No, I'll get all wet.
British Leyland cars that didn't break down, but... yeah. Cheap amphibious cars that broke down too.
It's going!
And they did it also for the specials. $1,000 cars in America, which needed to be jump-started all the time.
this is going to be the quickest jump in history.
Cheap Botswanan cars that broke down.
Throttle that's jammed wide open. Hammond, move!
Yeah, you get the idea. As Top Gear went on, the challenges got more entertaining and the cars actually got more reliable, but mainly because the production team got fed up of the cars overheating.
We proved that you can't buy a Porsche for less than 1,500 quid.
Yes.
Not if you want to go anywhere in it anyway.
But they never failed to be entertaining, so it doesn't matter. One aspect of the cheap car challenges that is rarely mentioned is the difference in the cars. It would usually result in really quite a varied lineup. The US special really comes to mind in that regard. You had the murder enthusiast in his Camaro, you had the cowboy wannabe in the symbol of the South pickup, and James in the Cadillac. Just yeah. The origins of the specials were actually a happy accident. I say did you know, but it's fairly common knowledge that the US special was just supposed to be another cheap car challenge, but you know, Alabama.
They could have killed us!
There was enough content for a full episode, so why not? Bit of trivia for you. If you ever get asked who came up with those slogans on the side of the cars, it wasn't Clarkson, it was actually Richard Porter. He had the idea for slogans for a film that never got made. So for the US episode, he just pulled them out of his drawer and was like, what about this? Anyway, this episode was a hit and thus the annual Top Gear special became a thing. The specials also had the added benefit of showcasing the chemistry between the three guys as well.
I'm doing yours. I'm getting you killed.
Yes, they had been able to develop their on-screen kind of back and forth with the news segments and the rare time that an item would be presented by multiple presenters, but the specials kind of gave us more. A solid hour of just arguing, banter and breaking James's aircon unit. Plus it also gave Top Gear cinematographers a time to shine.
This is where wildlife cameramen come to make a name for themselves with David Attenborough. But unfortunately our film crew are best really with cars.
The giraffe on the right. There. The big thing.
From a filmmaker's point of view, the show was brilliant, but casual viewers, they never would have noticed. Now, I know what you're going to say. Which one? The big one, the first big one. This came about because Richard came into the office one day and basically went, I want to go really fast. So the production team found a jet engine with some caster wheels attached to it. All the necessary precautions had been put in place. He had all the correct gear, the owner had done the first run of the day just to kind of get things warmed up, and he'd been briefed by Ben Collins, who was not the Stig. So Richard run several faultless runs, but remember what I said during the races segment about they would always go back and do the filler shots? Yeah, they did an extra run to get shots.
I suppose this is it then, isn't it really now?
This is what happened next, yeah.
And stop. Richard was taken to hospital and put into a coma, and, well, we all kind of know what happened after that. The media attention was simply mad.
Richard Hammond and Richard Hammond at Richard Hammond. With Richard Hammond lying seriously injured in hospital with a brain injury.
Obviously, nobody knew for quite a long time whether Richard would be able to come back onto the show, so they had to just stop things and not do anything until they knew for certain. Fortunately, he did make a recovery.
Absolutely. So, it gives me really great pleasure, because I didn't think I'd ever be saying this at one point. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Richard Hammond!
This is pretty awful. That was the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to do.
They began filming again for Series 9, but this time it was slightly different because everyone wanted to watch. So, when the first episode of Series 9 was shown, the viewing figures had jumped from 5 million in the UK to 8 million. 3 million more. Although viewing figures do fluctuate, they never really lost that audience. It's weird, but Top Gear wouldn't have turned out the way that it has done without that crash, without the attention. Every TV show has their hit years, and Top Gear was no different. My personal opinion, and you can argue this in the comments if you like, but personally, I think the Top Gear hit years were between Series 6 and Series 10. The highlight being Series 10. I mean, honestly, if you look back at that series, Greatest Driving Road, Second Amphibious Cars, Veyron vs Jet Fighter, PLP-50 going around the offices of the BBC, Botswana Special, Race Across London, the motorhome racing, the British Leyland film, Richard driving another fast car. Oh my God! the Brit Car 24-hour race, Fiat 500 versus BMX bikes,
Bloody hell.
and German performance saloons.
The M3 did a 2-minute 38.9.
That is quite funny.
How can you argue with that?
Then you have the guests: Dame Helen Mirren, Jules Holland, Simon Cowell, Jennifer Saunders, Ronnie Wood, James Blunt, Lewis Hamilton, and David Tennant. What a series! After series 10, it did dip a little bit, but I think it was just consistent then for, well, years. I do think from series 17 though, it did go up to series 20. I mean, series 20 was seriously good. And then it kind of plateaued a little bit for 21 and 22, but I don't think there was a single bad series really. But I want to delve into what made those series the hit years. And first, we're going to talk about chemistry. Ever since series 3 and 4, the team had noticed a bond starting to build between the presenters. Thankfully, they noticed and started putting them together more for the films. It definitely didn't start with series 6, but I do think that by series 6, each of the presenters are kind of bedded into their roles a lot better. You also can't forget the first car football. Ben Collins took part in that, which he's not the Stig. The Oslo race, the off-road toys, and oh yes, Sabine Schmitz overtaking superbikes for the transit.
Bike in my way, English oak on the bike.
It still brings a smile to my face. It was brilliant. One of my personal highlights was the Kristen Scott Thomas interview. For those of you who know, you know. The backstory, for those of you who don't know, is Top Gear had something called the Cool Wall.
James May, who eats pastry, drinks brown beer and thinks a curry is exotic, thinks this is uncool. He's always wrong on matters of such things.
The reason for the Cool Wall was, well, actually to waste time. If they had a show in the early years that was looking a little light film-wise, they need something that was going to be cheap, preferably in the studio, to waste the viewer's time, essentially. One particularly brilliant thing about it is that it was ranked on something that isn't really definable. Coolness. We all have our own interpretation of what cool is, and the presenters did too, which would then leave them to argue, and it would just be really entertaining, and the Cool Wall segment became a favourite among fans. How Kristen Scott Thomas fits into this is that she was the Cool Wall muse, as Jeremy said.
The way you can judge it is this, okay? You've got to take Kristen Scott Thomas out for dinner. Cool girl, yes? We all never heard of her, have you? Anyway, she's the coolest actress there is. You turn up in something like that, Ferrari 360, she's going to think you're a Burke.
So, Jeremy's thought path was always, we need to get her on the show. Well, they did, and it backfired. She pretty much shot him down. Jeremy, in a very out-of-character Jeremy, backed down from the arguing.
It's pathetic, isn't it?
Right, so cancel that.
What, order?
Yes.
So you've got one of these?
No!
Causing Richard and James to do this.
Well, I've only done 2 plays. Am I boring you already?
Anybody wants a job presenting Top Gear, the address is BBC Wood Lane, London W127TS.
That is what real friends do. Then you have the writing and our old friend Richard Porter. So there's 4 stars, if you like, in Top Gear. Obviously you had the 3 presenters and then you had Richard Porter. Jeremy has a very large, very bombastic style. Everything is shocking or amazing, horrifying or literally the best thing in the world. I can't. In the world. I can't do it.
In the world.
In the world.
And what we're in the world, absolutely.
Richard is cheeky and a little bit annoying. He plays jokes, he messes around, and he just irritates people. James had a very dry style that either is or it isn't. He makes even the most interesting things sound boring, but we kind of love him for it anyway. You see these styles on the show, particularly during the more non-scripted stuff when the presenters can really be themselves. Then you have Richard Porter. His style is very silly funny.
Who is the Stig? Now, we were all rigorously trained to deal with that last one, and the standard way of dealing with it was to release a smoke grenade and then use the ensuing confusion to torch the room.
He would usually be tasked with writing the Stig introductions, the Tonight intros, and would help putting together the news segments as well. Of course, other members of the production team would think of ideas. It was a team effort after all, but it was Porter that would collaborate with the presenters, especially to write segments. A lot of the show's silliness came from his tongue-in-cheek style. Some say the Stig was Jeremy's idea because he thought racing drivers couldn't make an intelligent comment, so they should have one that didn't speak. And that's true. Jeremy and Andy Willman, who's kind of like the puppeteer of Top Gear, going dance for me, except in this case the puppets are a very large Top Gear production team and 3 middle-aged men. They went to school together, and when they had new kids at the school, they would be called Stigs. It was perfect, it had like a slightly strange ring to it. The Stig became the faceless face of Top Gear, the ultimate advertising piece, and throughout Top Gear's growth, the question kept on being asked, who is the Stig? That's quite a complicated question to answer.
Oh, you see, because over the years, there have been thousands of them.
When Top Gear started, Perry McCarthy was a Stig, but he didn't really embody the Stig's character, although to be fair, back then, the Stig didn't really have a character. He was getting sloppy with the whole keeping it a secret thing, and so he got blown off the end of an aircraft carrier.
Stop!
Enter White Stig. In the early days, they didn't really bother to try and keep it a secret. I mean, he gave an interview on Dutch TV.
And you drive around?
Yeah.
Fast car?
Yeah.
Why you?
I'm the best. He was also listed as a high-performance driver that works closely with Top Gear on Hammond's accident report. Doesn't really leave much to the imagination. As time went on, people speculated it was either Ben Collins or Damon Hill, and sure enough, it was Ben. After Hammond's crash, the extra media attention got more and more people asking, who is the Stig? They were getting close to finding out, so to try and take some of the light off Ben, they thought, what if we put Michael Schumacher in the suit? During his time as the Stig, Ben basically became an actor. He started playing this arms crossed, no cares given character with little understanding of the modern world.
If you take it out of the car, it just falls over. It's useless.
The Stig was Ben Collins, but Ben Collins was the Stig. So when Schumacher came to Top Gear in 2009, they had to explain to him how a Stig should act. Luckily, Michael paid attention, and when he was asked to take his helmet off...
Remove your helmet. He's changed his mind, I knew he would.
That wasn't scripted, that was Michael playing the part.
Show the ladies and gentlemen that you are not a photocopy of... It's coming! Is it Susan Boyle? Is it Susan Boyle? Oh my God!
Fortunately, the plan worked, and attention for the time being was taken off Ben. But he was writing a book.
The identity of Top Gear's cult hero, the Stig, has been revealed after the BBC lost its High Court battle to keep it a secret. Ben Collins can now release his story of 7 years as the show's mystery test driver.
Ben Collins, better known, that's him! That's the man! It's the Stig!
It has been quoted that the reason he ousted himself as the Stig is because he couldn't cash in on Top Gear's success like the other members of the team. I mean, he had an amazing CV that he couldn't show anybody. People assume it was about the money, and that may have played a part, but Ben, being a racing driver, wanted to race.
And get stuck into racing at 200 miles an hour again, and that's where my heart is.
Getting sponsorship is hard. Being a racing driver is hard, unless you're one of the most famous racing drivers in history. Yeah, that opens doors. So Ben wrote the book, all the attention was back on Stig, everyone knew who he was, and he got racing again. After that, they got another Stig who's actually been playing the Stig for longer than Ben and Perry put together. Quite impressive considering he was found in a manger in Bethlehem during Top Gear's Middle East special.
I wasn't expecting that.
Or that's how they say they found the new Stig. The Stig wasn't just fast driving and funny introductions though. He also had a very large family with a lot of cousins. He had German Stig, American Stig, lorry Stig, African Stig, Aussie Stig, Chinese Stig, vegan Stig, Italian Stig, and snowmobile Stig. Hence why, who is the Stig is a tricky question because there have been many. The Star and a Reasonably Priced Car segments really divided people. Some people loved it, other people absolutely hated it. But as Andy Willman once said, people would say they don't like it, but then the number one question they always get asked, after obviously who is the Stig, is who's the guest this week? Obviously with the hundreds of episodes they did, there is some highlights. One of the best things about the segment as well is that Jeremy is never short of an opinion.
Is the deaths of children and deaths of adults.
There aren't any children on the M4 bus lane.
How many people get annoyed at that when they come down to 3?
Sit down. Sit down.
All right then, cheering and shouting at your clever remark. But basically, how many... Be like that.
Sit down.
And others were just brilliant, like him listing out Jay Leno's cars, for example.
Dodge Viper, Packard Caribbean, Chevrolet Corvette, Lamborghini Miura S. Dodge Challenger SRT8, Lagonda V12, Bentley Miura, Dodge Challenger RT. That's page 1. There's page 2. Do you want to see page 3? There's page 3. How the hell do you decide what to go to work in the morning?
Every single interview was different. He tackled each one differently. You also can't forget some of the more wilder celebs.
Oh, what's that? Yes. My God! People carry us for people who've given up.
Look at me!
You're off the... You hit... Not again on the follow-through.
I don't know what superpowers you people have, but can you lift it?
I think there was one more, actually. In Series 22, after filming the final proper episodes, they were supposed to be going up to Yorkshire to film the next day. In this rare occurrence as well, they'd actually hired a helicopter to get Jeremy, Richard and James from the Top Gear test track up to Yorkshire, and that meant they could actually have a drink. So, after filming, Jeremy had a glass of wine, or however many he had. It had been a long day. They flew up to Yorkshire, they were in a hotel. Apparently there was only sort of cold food on offer. He was a little bit pissed, had an argument with the producer and punched him.
BBC has sentenced one of its most high-profile television presenters, Top Gear host Jeremy Clarkson.
Yes, the Top Gear presenter was suspended after allegedly aiming a punch at a producer last week.
After spending a day filming, apparently Jeremy Clarkson snapped after realising that no food was then organised for him.
Now there are so many different storylines to this after the actual punch. So obviously you've got the storyline of the people actually working at Top Gear. You've got the storyline of BBC management, and you've got the story of the fans as well. So first we'll talk about the people who worked at Top Gear. They went into the office the next day, not even knowing that it had happened. Jeremy kind of came in and told them straight up. Then he went to BBC management and told them, and left the building for what would be the last time. In the kind of days and weeks after that, obviously, it was very sort of uncertain. The only thing that we outside of Top Gear knew is that he punched someone, and Top Gear wasn't going to be on air until further notice. Then you had BBC management, and obviously there was a few at BBC who just wanted Jeremy gone because he was a loudmouth, he said whatever came to his mind, and he didn't fit the BBC image. But it was also presenting their most successful show. But that's disregarding the fact that he punched a co-worker, essentially. If anybody else did that, they'd be fired, and they had to do that, basically. So they didn't renew his contract, we all know the story. Then you've got the Top Gear fans who signed a petition, 1 million signatures strong, that Clarkson should stay at Top Gear, and delivered it to the BBC offices in a tank. Yep, that's England for you. Of course, it obviously came out a little bit later on. He wasn't going to have his contract renewed. Everybody was very sad. I remember exactly where I was when I found that out. I was in college.
No, I'm not interested.
But, you know, life happens. They went to Amazon and Top Gear carried on. Okay, now we need to talk about Chris Evans, don't we? And season 23. Alright, okay, here we go. Following the departure of obviously Jeremy, Richard, James, Andy Willman, everyone basically at Top Gear, BBC needed to bring more people in. So they brought in Chris Evans, who is a widely known car fanatic. He owns a lot of Ferraris. He was well up for it. Another thing he thought of is that there was an idea for an open audition.
I can't imagine where they got that idea from.
And people around the country could send in their little video, and see if they could get a job on Top Gear. I sent one in, and Chris Evans didn't like it. Clearly. Anyway, after all of that, they revealed the full lineup of new Top Gear, and it kind of looked like, how many people do you want? It's fair to say there was a lot of critics of season 23. It didn't do brilliantly well, but if you break it down, and I'm going to be absolutely destroyed for this, I really am. If you break it down, it wasn't too bad.
You got all that? Me neither.
Now, I want to clarify that a little bit, okay? I'm not saying the series was good, because it wasn't, but there were good parts of it, if you exclude the studio segments. You have some of the standalone films that were actually decent.
Doesn't get any better. That ended that gearbox. Oh, bit of oversteer.
I'm okay with that. You had Chris Evans being sick with Sabine Schmitz at the wheel.
Go on!
I'm okay with that. You had those Chris Evans intros.
Tonight, I get chased. Matt gets chased. I chase Matt, and Matt chases me.
I'm not okay with that. Yeah, it was mixed. But at the end of the day, somebody was going to get the shots fired at them. Just happened to be Chris Evans. Maybe he wasn't fit for Top Gear and he left the show. And BBC then decided to, okay, let's make another presenter change, sort of. It was more like a presenter reduction. And they brought it down to Joey Tribbiani.
Hey, careful around my portrait.
Chris Harris.
But would you want it any other way?
And Rory Reid.
That's exactly what I need right now.
It was a really weird dynamic between the three, but it really worked.
Yes.
No. Yes. No. No.
And personally, post-Clarkson, Hammond, May era presenters, that's been my favourite lineup. But after 3 series, Joey was too far away from his daughter, who lived in America. Yeah. You can tell that was the problem because a lot of the films were shot in America. And that wasn't always a bad thing. You had the V8 film, for example, where each of them was told to choose a V8 car. Like Jamie Rich and James, they came up with 3 very different examples, and 3 which really fit their personality. Yeah, Joey had to go back to America. And they brought in Paddy McGuinness and Freddie Flintoff.
We're giving you Lancashire phrases here. This is the game, you see.
Don't look at me like I'm stupid. You're the one speaking gibberish.
When I first found out, I was absolutely horrified. Like, why is an ex-cricketer and a comedian going? Neither of them have ever... That was my argument back then. Since then, I have come around to Freddie. I'm still on the fence about Paddy. I think Paddy's a bit too showy for Top Gear. He's very much, hey guys, it's that and blah blah blah, and Top Gear's not really like that.
She's won the travel pillow, everybody!
Paddy has this weird character, and he's a great TV presenter. He's obviously been on Take Me Out and whatever else he's been on. But that's my personal opinion. Yeah. Then you have Freddie, and the reason I've come around to Freddie is because he's mental. Like bungee jumping a car off a dam. If I was a Top Gear presenter, I'd probably do that, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, he was basically just their resident crash test dummy, which I'm okay with that. It was a really good dynamic because you had Chris, who's obviously car mad, car nerd, everything. And then you had Freddie, who's, he knows a little bit, not too much. And he's not an adrenaline junkie, but he's not afraid of it. This again kind of stretches back to the Jeremy, Richard and James thing about their chemistry together. You see, they genuinely did get on. They genuinely liked working together. They knew each other very well, and they did act like schoolmates, trying to annoy each other or trying to embarrass each other. Whereas these 3, it's kind of like trying to just annoy each other. It comes across as forced.
You all right? You don't seem very infused. What are you wearing? It's your business, my friend. Deal with it.
So I think that's probably the main problem post Clarkson, Hammond, May, is the chemistry between them, because one thing the production team said during early Top Gear is that, you know, they needed a few years to kind of bed in. Great. They've had that. I think Chris and Freddie have bedded in quite well together, but I do want to just take a small section out of the video to just Chris Harris.
Look at the tackle on offer here. XPS convertible, fantastic. Look at this here. A Rosso Dino 308.
There's a Capri! There's a Capri!
Whoa.
I want to have a look at the BMW that's actually a kit car underneath.
Yeah, what's this turning up here?
Oh my. Pontiac Firebird. Did they ever make a convertible?
I think this one might have slipped under your radar, Chris. This is a very rare...
It's a DIY job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All this?
Yeah.
You want to start with that beam?
Yeah, because I want to make... The wheelbase is a bit wrong underneath.
Oh,
Look, come on. BMW Z1,
Chris,
green
Chris,
Elite,
we don't have time for you to
550.
list every
The
single
550's got a
car here.
burgundy
No, be
interior.
quiet.
Thank God for Chris Harris, because without Chris Harris, Top Gear just wouldn't be very good. They seem to be getting further and further away from what Top Gear is. And I'm not saying cars, because it's not just cars. I get that. Top Gear is entertainment, it's cars, but it's the chemistry. What they're trying to do with new Top Gear is just be entertaining and go away from the cars, and then once a series they'll tell Chris there's a lot of cars in the airfield, just go and talk about them.
SUVs. I wouldn't have any of them because they're all complete boxes. Now, Hyundai are making some great cars at the moment. Sadly, this is not one of them. You can forget about all this stuff, forget about all those SUVs and forget these hatchbacks, just buy a Golf. It does a better job than all of these cars put together. Golf, Golf, Golf. Can we go and drive some more supercars now, please?
This is the reason that I think you should still be watching Top Gear. If you remove the Top Gear name, if you just branded it as generic entertainment show and watched it, I think you'd enjoy it. It doesn't take itself too seriously, it's quite light-hearted, it is funny. Then again, Chris Harris running across a golf driving range in a T-Rex costume has to be one of the highlights.
Right, making a break for it. Run, dinosaur, run! Get it! I can't hit him quick enough! I can't hit him quick enough! Wow! Wow!
But regardless of what I think, and regardless of what other people think, obviously, the viewing figures have never been higher post Clarkson, Hammond, May era. The viewing figures are doing quite well. They're about sort of pre-Richards Crash Top Gear kind of viewing figures. That's kind of the area they're in now, which is okay, but it's not Top Gear figures, let's face it. But regardless, over 30 series, happy birthday to Top Gear, 20 years, it was my childhood show.
Mine won't start properly.
No, of course it will. It's a Porsche, Persevere. That doesn't sound good. Supercars, not mini stars. Not very good at this.
Oh, that's not gone well.
I can't believe I'm looking in... Whoa!
It would probably be rude to point out to him that he's pulled up in next door's pit.
I've had a heart attack.
I've won that.
Yes, you have, you've won.
This isn't going to take long.
Is it had torsion beam suspension, which was very forgiving in slow corners, which made the tyres last longer.
Well, you managed to find something boring about something incredibly exciting.
Oh, nice.
Oh, slow down, Sabine, please.
You need some fresh air.
To be especially careful.
Well, just at this point, it might be quite good because I'm spatchcocking the chicken, so I'm going to be cutting his backbone out.
I'm following a NASCAR.
Just added about a quarter mile to his lap there. The way this is written, it sounds like I just kicked your ass here.
Come on, please don't watch us.
Americana!
I don't know what to say.
Exactly.
It's more Tropicana, mate. Did you get the memo? Because they told me to buy the best convertible I could for 600 quid. Did they ask you to come as a mid-90s sex offender or what?
We need to slow him down, Fred.
You've gone the wrong way!
You've gone the wrong way!
Oh!
You've gone the wrong way, son.
What's this?
No, you're all right. Keep going.
Oh, you lying Fanny McGinnis!
Anyway, we hope you enjoyed those films, and all that remains now is for us to say thank you for watching.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for watching. And, well, goodbye.
Goodbye.
If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate you watching. I didn't expect the video to go on that long. There's obviously a lot of the Top Gear story that I couldn't cover in the video, for example, all of the controversies, some of the news segments and things like that. Obviously I was just trying to focus on the important stuff, and the important stuff, as it turns out, was quite a long video. But if you stuck with it, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully see you again soon next time. Thank you.